Hello everyone, it's Friedemann Findeisen from Songwriting. Welcome to the live Q&A, episode 41. Live! Alright, so today I want to talk about a little bit a book that I've been reading this week, which kind of blew my mind because it was condensing a lot of information that I'd been collecting for 5 or 6 years in my own life through various different sources, and that book just seemed to condense it all into one piece of literature, which I think is just fantastic. And it's called No More Mr. Nice Guy by, actually, I should have done some research, shouldn't I? No More Mr. Nice Guy is written by Robert A. Glover. And it's a really fantastic book on improving your confidence, I want to say, happiness in life in general, because the issue that the book addresses is that there's a lot of people out there that are nice guys, people who tend to think of themselves as nice people, and they also feel like they're doing a lot of things for other people, but they never get what they want out of relationships or businesses or sexually. They feel like they're just giving, but never really getting anything back, and it's kind of this trait that they have in mind when they actually do some things for other people. And so the book is about stopping being one of those nice guys and becoming more self-centered, which sounds like a bad thing at first, but the book goes through great length to discuss why that is actually a good thing, to be self-centered or to focus on yourself more. Because one of the many downfalls that you may discover being a nice guy will have is, for example, that nice guys tend to, for example, not be very honest with other people, because they tend to acclimatize so much to others that they become kind of chameleons, and they will say whatever is necessary to please that person. So they tend to be more notorious liars and stuff like that. And there's a lot of downsides to being a nice guy. And obviously, not getting whatever it is you want in life, obviously, is probably the biggest one. And so the book discusses how that came to be, those changes in our society, why there's so many nice guys. And the book does focus primarily on men, even though while I was reading it, I was thinking, this doesn't actually apply to men anymore, since with feminism and all, I think it really applies to anyone in the society. I think women could just as easily read it, or anyone else for that matter. I think it's really a matter of growing up and having the right amount of self-focus, and a healthy dose of confidence. And so the one thing it discusses, I think, really rather well is where biologically this whole thing comes from, the nice guy syndrome, as he calls it, where that comes from. And so the idea is that when we're born, we're super dependent, right, on others, and we all have these experiences of being abandoned, right? And as kids, we don't know any better, so we blame ourselves, and we think it's our fault that our mother isn't coming over when we're crying, or we're not getting the food that we want when we're hungry, or something like that. So we think it's our fault. And there's this, I think he calls it, what does he call it? The something shame. I forgot what he calls it exactly. But so that's one part of it, and the other part is that we think if we give to our mother, and if we pretend like we don't have any needs, that our mother is going to love us more. Because if we have too many needs, our mom or mother is gonna get annoyed, that's something we learn as kids. If we're too needy as kids, that especially if we have a mother who has a lot of problems of her own, then that can become something rather destructive in your own life. And so the whole book really is this, I wouldn't say guide, but it certainly discusses this whole idea of how can we become more self-centered again in a good way. Like, how can we, in Buddhism, you would probably say, how can you become centered? How could you become one with your environment? How could you become Zen, right? Becoming nesting in yourself, right? Instead of being so super flurry everywhere in the world at once, but finding your inner center and staying there. That's kind of what I think it's about. And it's really fantastic. It was recommended to me by a producer who was here a couple of weeks ago, and he said it helped him tremendously when he was a teenager. And I can understand why. I think it's the perfect book to read if you're feeling like you're giving a lot and you're not getting anything back. Because I think probably the reason is you and not your surroundings or the other people that you're giving to. And I think it's something I consciously changed about my life, and I think the book can teach you actually how to do that in your life as well, so that you can be a little bit more clear about what you want in your life, so that you can establish some boundaries for others as well. And those are, I think, very important things, and I think it's kind of, those things are actually crucial things to becoming a grown-up or to becoming an adult, really. So highly, highly recommend this book. I'm still not done reading it, but I would say I'm about halfway done or something like that. Fantastic book, No More Mr. Nice Guy, by that guy I named at the beginning of it. And if you're ever wondering how to spell that, you can just read it in the title. All right, so what's going on in the chat? We have Moreno here. Hello, sir. Welcome. Sean says, finally made one of these when it's streaming. Good to hear. Falfish says, hey. Anderson IV says, hey, man. Moreno says, I was into that book. What a crazy world. Cool. HK says, sorry, what book is this? Just joined stream. It's called No More Mr. Nice Guy. Anderson IV says, any tips on syllable choice in more rhythmic vocal melodies? Syllable choice. Yeah, this is that's a really good question, actually. So this is probably going to seem very strange to a lot of you guys, but with the advent of Swedish songwriters slowly taking over the American market, and I mean, I know that's on the decline a little bit right now, but like that was certainly a big influence during the 90s and 2000s. One of the things that Swedish music brought with it was non-native speakers writing American music, right? And so the lyrics got less and less important, or the meaning of the lyrics, the content of the lyrics, but the way the lyrics were phrased, or the words, or the syllables, or the consonants, or the vowels, that became all of a sudden really kind of important. And considering that people like Max Martin are, in fact, producers first and foremost. I mean, they're great songwriters as well and great performers as well, but they are producers. Don't forget that. It shows you how they approach melody writing. And I think the way they approach melody writing is from the standpoint of a producer, of a sound designer. And so the melodies that you get from these producers, not all of them, but most of them, are typically almost like a synthesizer line, and the words are used almost like a filter. So, that's all, like you can emulate that with a filter, which is why we had the dubstep craze with the wop, 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 which also sounds like words. And they basically approached from the other way around. They basically said, how can we make this phrase sound as great as possible by using the right words, the right syllables? And so really rhythmical syllables you can typically find in rap, and especially in fast rap, like I once learned to do the rap from Look at Me Now, which I did, a couple of episodes ago, or like the beginning of it at least. And there's like a lot of G sounds, a lot of D sounds. So let me do it again, and we'll find a couple of those syllables. I haven't rehearsed this, so bear with me if I mess up. Let's go, because I'm feeling like I'm running, and I'm feeling like I gotta get away, but I know that I don't, and I won't ever stop, because I gotta win every day. So there we have, let's go, because I'm feeling like I'm running, and I'm feeling like I gotta get away. There's a lot of gotta. That's a very typical thing for these fast, very rhythmical kind of raps, and that's something that you're gonna get a lot of in any kind of singing. It doesn't have to be rap. So listening to those fast raps, like that's going to just tell you the most used kind of consonants for very rhythmical singing. So obviously all the plosives are difficult to sing because it's because you have to change you have to close your mouth for that, and that makes things way more difficult. But the j, g, j is also difficult, but g. So all the what are they called? They're called the hard consonants. Is that what they're called? Whatever they're called. But the K, T, P, no, PB not so much, but B, T, C, those kind of consonants, the hard consonants, those are typically best for very rhythmical kind of rapping and therefore also for melodies. I'm trying to think of any melodies where you can see that really well. Well, a very obvious example would be E.T. by Katy Perry, which has the kiss me, kiss me, da 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 da. So the K here becomes this rhythmical element in that line, right? And it's very prevalent. So that will be an example of that. Yeah, again, listen to those really fast raps. Like Mac Lethal is a fantastic YouTube channel, in case you don't know it. I'm just going to type it into the chat here. Mac Lethal. If you haven't seen Mac's channel, he's so worth watching. You definitely have to check him out. And the one that you should see first, I think, is the Insane Alphabet Rap or something like that. I think that's what it's called. Super cool stuff. Like, he's crazy fast, and it's just so much fun. He's hilarious. So that's a really great source of inspiration. Anyways, let's move on to the next question. Moreno says, yeah, I struggled with women for the longest time. When I was reading to improve, a book that trumpeted all for me personally was Way of the Superior Man. Right, haven't read that one, but cool. Thanks for the recommendation. ARCCT 550 says, shit, I'm late. Hope I didn't miss anything. Well, you can always rewind. HK says, thanks. Andrew Portas says, hey, I recently got The Addiction Formula as an audiobook and wanted to say, really enjoying it so far. Really appreciate that you are the narrator too. Hey, glad to hear that, man. I was, I didn't do the edit of that audiobook, and I was like, when I heard it for the first time, I was like, oh man, I really do have a German accent, don't I? Yeah, but I'm glad you're enjoying it. But yeah, that was a lot of fun recording that audiobook. But it's difficult as hell, man. Like, man, audiobooks, that was very tough. Because I mess up all the time when I try to read text out loud for some reason. I don't know why. Like, when I'm doing my YouTube videos, it's fine. But for the book, man, that was so difficult. But I had a blast, man. It was really great. And it was fun to return to the book and like write that bonus chapter and compose those little musical examples. That was definitely a lot of fun. Yeah. Thanks, man. I'm glad you're enjoying it. Josh Raj Mishra says, sir, are you going to do a video on Soundgarden? Maybe. You know, I'm actually listening to a lot of Soundgarden and Audioslave lately, so it's not. It's a possibility, maybe. I haven't yet decided what the last episode of the artist series is going to be. So, by the way, new artist series coming out this week. How cool is that? System of a Down this Saturday. It's going to be cool. Looking forward to that. Michael says, evening. Hey, man. Robert Parson says, can you discuss chord progressions for non-pianists, for musicians who are drummers like myself who want and love the piano? Right, chord progressions. Honestly, I think the easiest answer I can give you, the sort of like, is kind of the copy and paste approach. I have a video on the main channel on holistic songwriting that's called My Top 10 Favorite Chord Progressions. Honestly, just going to those and just taking one of those and applying it to your song that's going to work. I mean, I have, if you subscribe to my newsletter, which you can find in the description of this, it's called Join the Community, Claim Gifts. If you sign up there, you're going to get a PDF with 201 chord progressions, I think. Or is it? No, it's 143 chord progressions. But that's plenty of chord progressions, more than you'll ever need, frankly. So you can download that. It's a PDF that's just like, it's structured into major and minor, so you can pick whatever you want. So that's a lot of fun. And yeah, I mean, honestly, I don't think so much about chord progressions. The thing that you have to know when you're reading any of these or when you're watching the video is that there is the slightest amount of music theory, and that is understanding what the degrees are. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. You should be able to understand what that means. And if you don't, please let me know here, and maybe I can explain it here in this live chat. All right. Utkarsh Singh says, yes, please. Would you do an artist series on Soundgarden? Andrew says, damn, nicely done. For what? For the rap? Lobster Rapper, Mac Lethal, says Michael Cunningham. Yeah, man, I love that guy. Jordan says, ha, wow, the info about Swedish musicians, writers, producers' influence is wild. That makes so much sense. Thanks. There you go, man. Moreno says, are there any positives to learning how to write songs on a piano? Well, yeah, it's gonna improve your piano playing, obviously, and understanding any part better in a song, I think, is always helpful. I always consider my major boost that I had in terms of songwriting was when I was in a band and I was writing all the songs. And every week I was just sitting at home working on bits of music, and at the end of the week we could rehearse, we could play everything. And I wrote all the parts. So I really had to go deep into into part writing for all these different instruments: drums, bass, guitar, second guitar, and vocals. No piano back then. But I learned a lot about those four instruments essentially. So that was really, really fantastic. And I think, anyone who, if you ever get the chance to really look at an instrument more and really to write for that instrument, go all the way. Like, really read everything you can about that instrument. Don't just learn about its range and dynamic possibilities, but learn about all the weird and funky stuff you can do with it as well, So, absolutely. I mean, the more you can learn about music, the better. That's a clear answer, right? But I found personally, I've never really played covers, so I never played songs by other people too much. I listened more to their songs and tried to figure out what it was that made them tick. I think that was more what I learned from them. And when I sat at the piano, it was more composing my own stuff. I never really covered anything that wasn't my own music, to be honest. But I know a lot of songwriters who do, so I'm not sure if that's like that's going to turn you into a great songwriter or anything. But personally, I've always just loved writing music when I was on an instrument, especially if it's on an instrument that I don't play so well. So I write a lot of music on piano because I'm a bad piano player. On the guitar, which I am fairly proficient at, I would say, it's a lot more difficult to write something that's simple because immediately I'm going to these fast, crazy licks or something like that, or like way too complicated chord progressions, jazz stuff that just kind of ruins a pop song, Whereas on piano, I'm happy if I can play the triads, So that typically helps in terms of simplicity. Okay, Jordan Crow says yes with 4 exclamation marks. No, wait, it's 5. No, it's 4 exclamation marks. Michael says, did we cover Patreon? Get that graphic made? Not yet. This week is insane for me. I have to produce 40 minutes of video. And like high quality video. Nothing, like half of it is for YouTube for the artist series, and the other half is for another video I'm doing for a producer friend here in Germany. So yeah, no, it's going to be a crazy, crazy week. But I think I'm fairly confident in saying that by Saturday, when the artist series releases, I think the Patreon is going to be ready. If not, the Monday after that. But any later, and I would be really ashamed of myself. So if I can't make it until next Monday or until next Saturday, until next Monday, let's say until next Monday, you really you get a chance to shame me publicly, and you can just like shame, and everyone should just write shame here in the chat. Sonic Charmlab says, hi, do you recommend using Logic Drummer? Is it a good alternative to using drum samples? Honestly, I haven't used Logic Drummer that much, but it's pretty good, what I've seen so far. I mean, the thing is, why don't I use it? Because I like to mess with things as much as possible. Like, I really like to go into the MIDI and write everything myself, because it just makes me feel like this is mine now. This is not something that anyone pre-programmed for me, but this is just me. This is exactly how I would do it. And so it's my sound and not someone else's sound. It's the same thing with a lot of people, like a lot of sound designers don't use presets because they say, like, why would I use presets? It's someone else's sound. I want to create my own sounds. So I have the same thing with writing stuff. I would never use something that is pre-written in a song, whereas sound designers would never use something that is a sound that is pre-designed. For me, it's the writing. I could never like just use a drum sample and use that, or like a drum loop and use that as a core centerpiece in my song. It would feel like cheating to me. I want everything to be me. And so to me, that's not an alternative personally. But that being said, if you're not a drummer yourself, I think the Logic Drummer is pretty good. The sounds are pretty good. I wouldn't say, they're not super modern amazing, but they're really pretty good. And a lot of producers that I've talked to all say, hey, Logic stuff that comes with it is really pretty good. And some even use it in their songs. I think usually they don't use Logic Drummer. They might use the samples for the same reasons as me. They probably want to mess with it a little bit more. I understand that you can let Logic Drummer drum for you and then mess with it afterwards. Still kind of feels wrong for me. I don't know. So I personally don't use it, but I think it's pretty good. And again, I haven't messed with it too much, so I probably couldn't really say. But yeah, this was a really weird answer, wasn't it? Jordan says, easy keys, lol. Yeah, yeah, possible. Ivan Devora says, I don't know if you would have an answer for this, but let's see. Well, let's see. Can you give any advice on trying to get booked to perform outside of the United States? Obviously nothing huge, but just like venues. Oh man, I think obviously the best way would be to have a large following around the world, and then to just like post it on social media saying like, hey, I'm going to this place. Can someone are there any cool locations where you're in your area? Where could I play? And doing something like that. You could also do Facebook advertising for the location. That's probably a good one. You know, it feels weird to advertise your own gigs, to lose money to play a gig. But what's really happening, this is confusing a lot of people I've found when I talk to them in person. What people don't understand is that if you're advertising for something and you say, like, let's say you're spending $5 to get someone to come to your gig, but you're making $15 from selling that ticket to that person, then you've just gained $10, right? So you've just made money. That's a business. That's how it works. Sometimes you got to spend money to make money. It is very important that you make money in the end. So don't spend money willy-nilly and thinking like, oh yeah, I got to spend money to make money, and never measure if you actually make back the money and get more for it. Otherwise, you just have something that's going to financially ruin you and it's not a business. But if you measure and you did make money, then maybe next time it makes sense to put a little bit more money in. And that's how you can grow your business. That's essentially how growing a business works. There's this old rule of saying the person who can spend the most for a customer always wins. And that means if I'm, let's talk about songwriting coaches for a second, right? Say I'm a songwriting coach and someone else is and we have another songwriting coach, and I sell a product that is $100, and that other person is selling a product that is $90. So what that means effectively is I can spend up to $99 to acquire a customer, and I'm still going to make profit. That other person can only spend, what did we say? His product was $90, right? So he can only spend $89 to get a customer. You could even go over that technically, because you're probably not just going to sell one product to them, but it's more of a risky move. But I'm going to leave that out of the equation for now. But that's kind of what it comes down to. Even if you just make a very, very small margin, you're still making profit. But if you're not making profit, then you don't have a business and you're ruining yourself financially. So be very careful with that. So it's something to try out. You know, if you want to get some gigs outside of the United States, try Facebook advertising. You can target it so specifically to one specific area in the world. That's definitely worth trying out. And if it doesn't work, you know, then you've tried it at least. Or you're going to know what to do better the next time at least. HK says, the Swedish consonants and syllables totally make sense with ABBA now. Thanks. Well, they're called ABBA, right? How rhythmical can you say anything? Like, you couldn't say ABBA more rhythmically. Anderson says, any updates on the Patreon? Yes, coming very soon. Sorry, guys. Again, lots of stuff, lots of video to produce this week. So, yeah. But, damn. Sonic Charm Lab says, I still follow your simple song structure of the Hitsong Architect series. How to distill a 4-measure intro if you have an 8-measure, 8 chords first verse? Oh yeah, that's a great question. Very good question. Simply, I think the best way to do it is to either write an intro with 4 different chords, or to just use the last 4 chords of that 8 chord progression, or the first 4 chords. You know, super simple. Just use any 4 chords out of those, or write something completely new. Typically, you'll find that the last 4 chords work better, because that typically loops back around the best. But, you know, it's sometimes worth experimenting. And, yeah, so it doesn't really have to be complicated. You can even shorten it down further to 2 bars, you know, and write 2 bars originally, or use the last 2 bars, or any 2 bars out of those 8-measure chord progressions that you've already written. So it really doesn't have to be complicated. You know, just like find something. As long as it fits the rest of the song, that's fine. Nobody really cares about the intro. The intro is only important to like catch someone's attention. That's really all it's used for today anyways. Anderson says, sorry, I got a lot of questions in my mind today. That's good. Do you have any tips on programming choirs? Actually, with the good, I just watched this. I don't know why I did that. I for some reason, YouTube recommended this guy to me. I think he's called Mr. Roboto. Was that it? No, what is it called? Mr. Zed, the robotic comic. And he has this bit where he goes, good, and he's like, so it's an actual comedian, but he pretends to be a robot, and he's actually pretty good. And anyways, so that was still in my mind when I said that. That sounded really fake. That's the reason why. Do you have any tips on programming choirs? It depends on how big the choir is. If you're programming a small choir, breathing becomes really important. Because you can, so if you have like a, say, 4 or 5 piece choir or something like that, then you're gonna you want to program in those breaks when they all can take a breath. So what helps there, programming the different individual voices, is actually singing the lines and making sure each line is singable. If you have a bigger choir, then typically choirs may use something called staggered breath, which means I just kind of notice when the person next to me takes a breath and I don't take my breath at the same time as them, meaning we can sort of overlap and we take breaths while everyone else is singing, and it sounds like we have just one wall of sound that is never interrupted. That being said, I still would sing everything then as well, because sometimes breath, like taking a rest, pausing during the singing, can actually be a really great thing. And can make the whole thing more musical, and it just gives the whole thing, well, breath. It gives it life, you know. So that's one thing. The second thing is, again, sing your stuff, and you're going to realize that what doesn't work so well for writing melodies for vocal arrangements is big jumps. Typically, you're going to have smaller movements, and that's stepwise motion typically, sometimes thirds, maybe jumping up a fourth if you're going from the 5 to the 1. Those are the most typical moves in choral arrangements for sure. But that is for background arrangements. Are you talking about like a foreground arrangement for the choirs? Like, is this the main focus of the song, or is it background? Because if it's background, then like using stepwise and maybe a 5 to 1 every once in a while, then you're gonna be totally fine with that. If it's a foreground thing, then please let me know, because there's a lot more to that than what I just said. Sean says, hey man, do you know exactly how song math or melodic math works? The term gets used a lot in reference to Max Martin's songwriting and by songwriter Ross Goen. So yeah, I've obviously heard about melodic math. No one really knows exactly what it is. I'm not even sure if Max Martin knows exactly what it is. There's a couple of interviews where he talks about it a little bit. From what I can gather and from what I hear in his songs, which is even more important, because, you know, what good is a theory if you don't actually use it? It's really going towards what I'm talking about in the addiction formula, which I think he was one of the founders of that whole idea. He like started that whole movement towards like structuring your songs more and, you know, transitioning through stuff in certain ways. And so that's all stuff that you can read in the addiction formula. He also uses it also has to do with repetition, how phrases are repeated, and I think it's just a collection of techniques that make a song more memorable as well. Stuff like in the interview I was reading, and I think there's only 2 big interviews that he's given over the years, because he's a very shy person. In one of the interviews he was talking about using the same melody for the verse and the chorus, and letting the production do the energy work, essentially pushing the chorus forward only through the production. So you can hear this in what I just talked about, E.T. by Katy Perry, which is "You're so hypnotizing, da 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 da." That's the verse, and the chorus is "Kiss me, kiss me, da 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 da." It's the exact same melody, right? The exact same rhythm. Everything's exactly the same. It's not even an octave higher, which you might think it is. Nope, it's exactly the same. The only thing that changes is the production is pushing forward in the chorus. Excuse me. So, no, there's no real information out there. We can listen to it in his songs, and I think that's the most important thing. And so don't worry about it too much. I know I think it's too tempting. If you think about it too much, you're going to think like, oh, I'll never have this information. It's almost impossible. And it is impossible to get, essentially. if you think that this is the information you need in order to write better songs, then you are going to fail. So just let it be and say, like, you know what? It's fine. Because, it doesn't matter if I have this information or not. You can still write great songs. Just start writing and figure out your own things. Figure out your own rules. Figure out your own melodic math, so to say. All right, because that's how they did it as well, right? It's not something that they derived from listening to, making crazy pop formulas. It wasn't some guy with like a crazy doctor with mixing stuff in his lab and stuff exploded and they were like, oh yeah, this is melodic math now. That's just not how it worked. So that's something they figured out through trial and error and listening to the charts, and you can do the same. So don't worry about it too much, man. Just write and you're going to figure it out all by yourself. Moreno says, I hear replicating songs is great for beginner producers. Is this true? Yes, it is. Certainly, because the most important thing, I think, is because it forces you to really listen to that production, and you're going to hear all those small little things that are going on in the original production, and you're going to listen. You're going to figure out, hey, some of the things you're going to figure out are stuff like if you reproduce a pop song, you're going to be like, hey, you know what? This whole song just has 5 instruments. That's all. My productions have 30 instruments. What does that tell me? Maybe I shouldn't use so many instruments in my pop productions. So, good example for this would be Shape of You by Ed Sheeran, which almost has no instruments. Like, there's so little in that song. There's a lot of, the sounds that are being used are amazing. And there's a lot of like small ear candy that's being used and the way that reverb is used. But the essential elements of that song are very, very, very limited. There's not a lot going on in that song. So, so absolutely, like replicating something in terms of production, I think is great. Covering a song, I'm not sure how much that's going to help you as a writer, as an instrumentalist. Of course, it's going to help you because it's going to force you to play patterns that your hands aren't used to. So it's going to make you a better instrumentalist, better songwriter. I'm not sure, but reproducing, because it's kind of a skill, and it's the same with production. It is, to a certain extent, that is a skill, and you can get better by reproducing someone else's production. Shame, says Ayalin. Thanks. I highly appreciate it, but you're a little too early. So next week you get the chance. Utkarsh Singh says, could you please tell how do you suggest basic mixing for a song in Logic Pro X? Also love your channel. Cheers from India. Thanks, man. Well, I have a course about that, actually, which really covers in depth how to work with Logic Pro X. I'm going to send you the link here if you can't afford it, because I know that India is kind of tough with conversion rates and stuff like that. Then please just let me know and we can work something out with coupons or something. But I want to make sure that you can get that course, all right? You can't afford this course. Just let me know if you don't have the money. Just let me know, and we'll make sure that works out. All right. But because the Logic course is really where it's at, and I actually just added 2 more hours to the whole course by going just through equalizing. It took 2 hours. It's a very complicated subject matter. So the course is now 6.5 hours long already, and it's still not done. Like, I'm adding compression next month, and then we're really going into the creative bits. So it's going to be a long, long course. All right, Camera says, I have a song that I'm working on. I have a verse into a chorus. I also have chords, but I'm kind of stuck. How much would you charge for some help? I was told to write a song from my piano teacher. So that's something that's actually going to change with the new Patreon account that's coming, hopefully next week, or maybe this week. We'll see. Up until now, I did it through Skype coaching, which is something I've grown a little tired of, mostly because so many times I'm saying the same things over and over again in Skype coachings, and I'd rather be making courses that can help everyone answer those questions, and I'd rather be doing live Q&As like this where I can answer a lot of questions, quick fire mode, whereas I feel sometimes in Skype sessions, like 30-40% of it is just us, I don't know, kind of repeating stuff over and over again, and it's not, we could be talking about so much more in an hour, and I feel like if we did that, I'm not feeling like I'm giving enough value, essentially. So that's something I kind of want to stop doing, and I want to move it to Patreon, where we're going to have these weekly Skype sessions, and also every other week, we're going to do feedback sessions where you can send in your songs, and I'm going to give feedback live on air to them. So that is probably the closest you're going to get to that. Yeah, so just that's what I could recommend right now. All right, let's see. There we go. Eric says, I think you have a book sale coming up from Camera. Oh. I think Camera already owns the addiction formula, don't you? I think you do, Camera, right? Because yeah, we've talked on Facebook a little bit. Martin says, hey, sorry, I'm late today. That's fine. You can watch the rest later. I come from piano, learning to play e-guitar at the moment. Great. What could be a good practice besides playing songs? I want to use it for composing and producing in long term. Honestly, the most important thing is to already use it to write. Just experiment on it. Don't just use the chords that you learned in class, but figure out your own chords. You know, that's what I do all the time. So much of my writing process is actually just going to the piano, closing my eyes or not even looking at the piano and just doing this. And just pressing keys until I find a chord where I'm like, oh, this is interesting. I like this sound. What's that? Oh, I guess it's, okay, so it's a C major in the left hand, and then I'm playing something like a D major 7 in the right hand, but in a weird inversion. Okay, all right, and my thumbs are crossing or something. All right, that's a cool voicing. Let's see if I can find some more chords that sound like that, and maybe I can turn that into a song eventually, right? Same thing on guitar. I'm just sometimes pressing 1 or 2 strings and then letting the rest of them ring openly, and sometimes you get a really interesting, open, beautiful chord, you know? So just experiment. I'll allow it, you know? That's exactly how you write songs, is not by thinking about it, by just doing it. Sometimes you just need to close your eyes and just play something and be like, oh, this sounds really nice. There's just this one note in it I don't like, so let's just move that here. And again, the right note is always just 1 fret away, as someone so very nicely said on the last Me versus the Internet, which just came out on Saturday. So if you just find a wrong note in what you're playing, just move it 1 fret up or down, and you're going to find a chord that might actually sound really, really nice. And maybe you have something that no one else in the world has ever played before. It's possible. And another thing that you can do if you really want to get crazy is, so this I wouldn't necessarily recommend if you're just starting out, but if you're a little bit used to standard tuning on guitar, this is what I do quite a bit actually. And a lot of songwriters that I've talked to, especially like, I gotta admit, it's probably more old-fashioned songwriters than like the modern, highly commercial songwriters. But the old-fashioned songwriters like to do this a lot, I've found, is retuning your guitar to a new tuning, like what's called an open tuning. So it starts with just doing like a drop tuning where you tune down the lowest string, the E string, to a D. That becomes like a kind of a metal tuning because you can play power chords really easily. But then it goes further than to like using open D tunings, which retunes the 2 highest strings, I think. Anyways, like there's a bunch of tunings that you can find online, and playing with those is going to completely mess with your mind, because nothing that you're used to, is almost nothing, is going to work on this new tuning. So you have to just experiment all over again, and you're going to find new chords. But then you're going to play stuff that no one ever played before. One example of this from my own career is a song called Good Times, which you can find on my SoundCloud page. If you search Friedemann Findeisen SoundCloud, you're going to find it. It's called Good Times. This used an open tuning. I think it actually was a tuning that I didn't find anywhere. I was just honestly just twisting the knobs until I found a tuning where I was like, okay, openly this already sounds really beautiful, so let's just go with this. And then I, wrote something with new chords. I didn't even know exactly what I was playing, because I didn't even know what kind of notes I tuned it to. And I could have checked it out, but that didn't really matter to me. I just wanted to find interesting sounds, and what I was actually playing wasn't so important. And I mean, I could kind of hear, okay, so now I'm going to a 4, I guess, but that doesn't really matter. If you're making something beautiful, why would that matter? So don't be afraid to just mess around with it. It's a tool, right? It should get you from A to B. That's how I see it. Like, there's a lot of people who go really crazy about guitars, and they want this sunburst model, or it has to be this Fender Strat or whatever. And for me, it was like with cars. It has to get me from point A to point B. And if the first thing I want to do with the guitar is just retune the knobs and like try out some weird strings and use the thickest strings at the bottom and stuff like that. That's what I want to try. I want to try some weird stuff. Work with harmonics and stuff like that. So I know you have a certain respect for your instrument, and but that needs to slowly go away if you want to be really truly creative with your instrument. So, work on losing that respect for your instrument. It's fine. You can do anything on your instrument that you want. There is no rules. You make the rules. There's guitarists who just have 2 strings on their guitar. There was some metal guitarist who was just playing power chords. It's fine, you know, if that's all you want to do, if you really want to simplify it that way, that's great. No one else does that. It's amazing. All right, let's see. Taylor says, do you ever use automated mixing plugins like Vocaline or Vocal Writer? I used Vocaline for quite a bit until my trial ran out, and I haven't bought it yet because it's really expensive, but it's definitely on the list. I really loved Vocaline because it takes care of so many things that usually take a lot of time. Aligning background vocals, that is. So what Vocaline allows you to do is it lets you analyze the main vocals in terms of rhythmical stresses or rhythm, essentially. And then you can say like, okay, so these are the background vocals. Please align them with the main vocals so that timing-wise, they're exactly the same as the main vocal. And that's just basically just a click. I mean, it's a little bit more involved than that, but it's pretty much just a click, and it's so quick, and I really love it. Vocal Writer, I tried that out a little bit. I don't know. I'm not so sure. I don't use it anymore. Some of my producer friends like it. I've never seen it in any of their productions, though. So they say they like it, but I've never seen them use it, so I'm not sure what that says about it. I don't know. Vocal Writer isn't the biggest thing, but Vocaline you'll pretty much find in every studio at this point, I think. Oh, focus. Here we go. Hand. Look at the hand. There we go. Better. All right. Anderson Forth says, I'm talking about foreground choirs for epic orchestral type of songs. Right. If you're talking about foreground choirs, things are quite a bit different because then you're going to have melodies. With background choirs, typically you just want to emulate the chords, right? You're just writing out the chords in a slightly different arrangement. With foreground choirs, you're going to have melodies, and those are typically going to be sung by the sopranos or by the tenors. That's typically where the melodies are. So the highest voices of the males and females, or the females and males, I should say. If you don't do that, if you want another section, so the altos or basses to sing the melody, then you have to clear up the arrangement a little bit. So maybe don't let the sopranos also sing something really complicated, because whenever you have a melody that's higher than the main melody, people are automatically drawn to that. And so if you want the altos to sing a melody, then let the sopranos sing long notes. Don't let them sing anything complicated, because anything you do, people are going to pay attention to that instead of your main melody. You can also do, if you want something really big and epic, you can just double up the melody by altos and sopranos, or tenors and sopranos in octaves. So that's going to give you the really full and thick sound. This works best if you already have an harmonic background with the rest of the band. So maybe you have a bass player and, I don't know, a pianist in the background or something like that, or e-guitar or something like that. That's going to already establish what the harmonies are. Then you don't really need the choir to establish the harmony as well. You can pretty much just let them sing melodies. And if you want to, depends on how far you want to go into the classical zone, you can let them sing counterpoint against each other. So the females are singing counterpoint against the males. That would be a possibility. But that kind of sound has that classical sound, so it depends on if you like that or not. What else? Yeah, so there's a couple of things. There's a couple of rules that are typically mentioned when writing for choirs. Stuff like what I said already, like with the stepwise motion, and you don't usually jump more than a fourth or a fifth. Personally, I think if you want something really dramatic, I think you totally should, and I think sixes are especially great for that, or even sevenths or octaves. It sounds just really, really dramatic. It's just a little bit more difficult to arrange that kind of stuff. Let me see if I can think of an example. There's something called drop 2, drop 4, drop 2 and 4 voicings. That's something you should definitely check out, and that has to do with how the chord is spread out. So for example, I'll give you an example. If you have kind of what you want to do is the first three melodies, so that's soprano, alto, and tenor, should kind of stay close to each other, right? So that's kind of the block chord. The bass can move more freely. That first of all, that can have its own melody. It can really just sing the bass notes of the chords. And it can be kind of far away from those three notes. But those three notes here, so soprano, alto, and tenor, should kind of stay close together. They pack together in a chord. What you don't want is the soprano to be like way up here and then alto and tenor being here and the bass down here. That's usually not very good. Typically you want them to stay kind of close together. And by close together, I would say not further apart than a sixth. An octave is stretching it, but all right. So if you want to double up the main vocals, the sopranos, the classical way of doing it would be to double it up in the tenors an octave below and have the alto sit somewhere in between, maybe singing the fifth or the fourth or something like that. If that works with your song, or maybe have something like that, I guess. I think what you can also do is just harmonize the melody. So have the soprano sings the melody, and then alto and tenor kind of sing the third and fifth and root notes that the main melody isn't singing. That's one way of doing it, essentially. So there was a lot of stuff already. So if you if I was going too fast, just rewind this video and go through it a couple more times. Do research the drop 2s and 4s. That's especially important if you have big jumps in the melody, because that's typically when you get that stretching of the chord, right? If you have this really nicely packed chord that moves like this, and then the soprano jumps up here, then you have those two notes down here, and that's not going to sound nice. So what needs to happen here is that those also need to jump, so you have this kind of chord. And maybe the tenor here jumps up as well a little bit, so you have this kind of thing here, so that they're still kind of equally distant from one another. Again, bass is a different thing, but those first three voices need to kind of be packed together, and the intervals between the first and second and third voice should be pretty much should be similar, at least. So you shouldn't have this kind of situation where you have a really small interval between the lowest ones and the really like this kind of thing, and you also shouldn't have this kind of thing, right? So it should be like this or like this, but that's kind of what happens with the first three voices. The bass does its own thing. All right, I've talked about this long enough. Anyways, but it's a really fascinating subject, and I'm happy you brought it up, because that's something I love talking about, because I don't talk about that enough on holistic songwriting, the orchestral stuff, which I'm still really enamored with. So thanks for that opportunity, man. There's a lot of questions, and we have 13 minutes left, so I'm going to go through these a little bit quicker. Kai says, there's a recent hour-long interview Max Martin did with Polar Music where he talks in detail about melodic math and how he doesn't really think of it that way. Brilliant interview. Haven't seen that yet. Have to check it out. I've heard of it. Kai says, should we sing our instrumental parts? Starting to seem like the more an instrument has the feel of a human voice, especially the way we have to breathe, the better. Absolutely agree. I sing almost everything, starting with drums, bass for sure, guitar not so much usually, I gotta be honest. Oh, well, if it's like something funky, if it's like a one-note melody kind of thing, like a something like that, where the rhythm is the most important thing, I'll definitely sing that as well. And vocals, obviously. So I sing pretty much every single part of my song while I write. And I couldn't highly recommend it enough. Ishak Shafiq says, hi, everyone. I am new here. Good to be here. Yeah, it sure is, man. Welcome. Utkarsh says, it says $67 for the entire course. Well, I'm a student and I guess saving for a month or two, and I'll be able to enroll into the course. Thank you. Cool, man. Yeah, let me know if you need a discount or something, because I know India can be a bitch when it comes to that. Yeah, here we go. Mike says, if no Skype coaching, you should really do a walkthrough of you live writing a song from scratch for a Patreon video. Maybe over the course of a week or two, to not have time pressure. Yeah, that sounds like a good idea. Actually, that's actually something I was considering for like a stretch goal, or whatever you call it on, what was it called? Like an sort of achievement or whatever you call it. If you have a certain amount of subscribers, then you have these things that you do for your patrons. And yeah, so I don't think it makes sense if I just have like 5 patrons, but if it's like 30, 40, then it slowly starts to make sense. So that's definitely something I'm considering. I think it's a really great idea. Thanks, Mike. It was so helpful when you and I wrote that song together. Everything just clicked. I got a demo 80% done from scratch in 2 hours the other day, which is astounding for me. Thanks, man. That really means a lot, you saying that. I completely agree. I think there's nothing more valuable than watching a professional work writing songs. That's how I learned it. That's how I learned getting so much quicker, just because you see they're making decisions so quickly, and it like gives you perspective on like, hey, this doesn't have to be difficult. I can just write music. That was kind of my big insight when I watched a professional work for the first time, how he like wrote something in like half an hour and it was pretty much done just really astounded me. So really happy to hear that, and that's something that we should really be doing. That's a really good point. Thanks. Ishak says, I'm enrolled in your drum writing for non-drummers course. I was looking for how to compose music with only drums and percussion. I'd like to ask you whether you will cover this. I don't think I'm going to cover it in the course, maybe in the future, because the courses are still ongoing projects. If I ever figure out something new about one of the subjects, I still upload new videos to those courses. Only drums and percussion typically means, I mean, I think you can learn everything you need to know from just that course. And you need to study the different percussion instruments. I highly recommend orchestration books for that matter, because they typically explain well what the different ranges are and what the best ranges are for percussion instruments like the glockenspiel and timbale and all these different percussion instruments, different kinds of drums and different kinds of cymbals. So that's something I would definitely check out if I were you. But to be honest, I've never written a purely percussive song. I have a friend who did. Maybe I should have him on the live chat at some point, and maybe we could talk about that. He's a drummer himself, and maybe he would be a better person to talk about this than me. It's a good question though. I think I think it's got to be I don't want to assume because I haven't written anything. So I think the course definitely shows you how to like write for a drum set though in general, and then it really is down to your creativity how you want to unfold it. I think sticking to a kind of a structure like the one described in the addiction formula would probably work. All I can say good luck. I can only say good luck, unfortunately. Sorry, it's just not my expertise. Sonic Charm Lab says, most good plugins, Melodyne, sound toys are very expensive, to me at least. Any tips to get them cheaper? Can you purchase them second-handed? Don't know if that's legal. It's not legal because it's software. Second-handed doesn't mean it's used or anything like that. If you buy clothes second-handed, then they're really objectively not as good as if you bought them new because someone else has already worn them, maybe stretched them out, maybe spilled coffee on them or something. With a plugin that's digital, that just cannot happen. So sometimes you can get them cheaper for like student discounts if you're still a student, or if you're a teacher. Otherwise, you're just going to have to pay full price. And yes, they are very expensive, which means, I still have a long list of plugins that I want for my studio. And you're just like slowly gathering one plugin after the other. That's just how it is. It's like that for all of us, unfortunately. And honestly, I personally don't think there's anything wrong with pirating plugins in the beginning, like when you're really just starting out and you're just producing for yourself. And obviously there's like the trial versions of stuff, but in the beginning, like, you want to know what the different plugins do. So having a couple of professional plugins on your computer, if you're not releasing anything, I don't think there's really any harm in that. Probably the lawyers of Waves and all these companies would disagree with me. But if you're not releasing anything, I think that's kind of fine. So, as long as you buy the plugins that you use regularly after a while, which is what I did, I think that's fine. And I think I've pretty much bought all of them at this point. But yeah, just be fair to the company, I think, but also don't be crazy. Like I've also spent money on plugins that I never use now, and that feels like shit. I've spent a lot of money, sometimes like $500 for a plugin where it's like, oh, this is gonna be so great, and then I use it, I'm like, I expected more after the demo or after the trailer or whatever. So in that case, I wish I would have pirated it first, and then I would have deleted it again from a hard drive, or I would never would have used it. So it's same thing kind of. So this is obviously not very legal what I'm talking about here, but let's be honest with each other. That's a big part of the way that music producers start working in this industry, is that they start pirating stuff, and once they start making money, they actually buy the plugins that they need. All right. Moreno says, is a chunk of production understanding how to have sameness with a slice of variety? Yes, I would say that's a part of songwriting as well. That's really kind of the core, is when do you change things up? When do you repeat things? And typically repetition is a good thing because it makes things more memorable. And if you have something that's actually worth listening to for a couple of times, then repetition is the best thing you literally can do. And that's why writing pop music is so hard, because it just repeats the same thing over and over again. So that one thing that it's repeating has to be really, really good. So otherwise it would just get boring. So the trick becomes, when do you put in that variety? When do you change things up a little bit? When do you have an alternate version to give to your listener? I was just listening, actually, a good example of this might be Be Yourself by Audioslave, which, listen to the chorus, man. It's just that one line. Just to be yourself is all that you can do. That's the whole line for the chorus. And he keeps it interesting by changing it ever so slightly. He's changing the rhythm for it. He's sometimes changing the pitches. It's done so well, you know. So yeah, I think the big lesson here is, write something that is really good, that's worth repeating, and you can repeat that for almost forever. And then find ways to keep it interesting once it gets boring. Maybe change things up by introducing another loop, or introducing a different melody in the chorus or something like that. And then once you get back to the verse, it's fresh again, you know? All right, Pedro says, I'm 16, by the way. Yeah, so you got my answer. That's what I would say personally. Colin Farrell says, do you have or plan to have a non-Logic version of the Geek-Free Music Production course for those of us without Macs? Or do you think it can be applied to other DAWs like Ableton as is? I'm not sure yet. I was meddling with Ableton Live for a while, and I do like it. It's just that I'm so much quicker in Logic, and it's such a big hassle to... I wasn't aware how much of a hassle it is to really switch DAWs. I'm not saying I'm never going to switch over to Ableton, but if I do, I am going to make a Geek-Free music production version for that as well, or I'm going to upload it into the course that's already there. That being said, I think the course right now, as it is mostly targeted towards Logic, in that, like, the shortcuts that are being explained are Logic specific, but there is a lot of things that I think, first of all, you would probably think, oh, cool, how do I do that in Ableton actually? And you're going to figure it out by yourself. That's one part of it. And starting from the last update that I made about equalization, everything that I upload from now on, so, you know, there's already 2 hours of that in the course, and everything that comes from now on is going to be non-specific. So it doesn't only relate to Logic Pro X. It's pretty much for any DAW, because equalization works the same across all platforms. All right. Cool. Kai says, oh, this is a great question. Fantastic. Sort of an image-related question. What's your head shaving routine? I shave too. Great. My head shaving routine is whenever it gets too long, and usually before I start recording videos for YouTube, that's when I shave my head. That's my head shaving routine. And when I shave my head, I also shave my beard. That's the whole secret, man. All right. Colin Farrell says, thanks. You got one more bye then. Oh, Superman. Super happy Superman. I'm happy to hear that, dude. Glad to hear it. Cool. Yeah, let me know what you think, and if it's not what you wanted, then I'll give you a refund, obviously. But I think it's fair to say that it's really starting to become a course that can be applied to almost all DAWs at this point. Moreno says, you did a great job on the EQ update. Very innovative. Hey, thanks so much, man. That really means a lot, because that was a crazy amount of work, making something as complicated as EQing simple, or relatively simple. So that means a lot. Thanks so much. Eric says, yeah, Kai, he stopped removing that little patch in the middle of the mustache he had a year ago. Did I have a patch in the middle of my mustache here? I know for a long time I shaved off this bit here, so it was just like skin, like no hair here, this middle bit here, like someone this is German humor, but someone said to me, if you ever were to kiss Hitler, your beards wouldn't touch. That's that's great. Not that I would ever, it's just, I'm not even gonna start. Anyways, Moreno says, your favorite record industry book in terms of business. Get More Fans. That's my favorite one. I really like that one. I'm gonna write that in the chat here. Get More Fans. Fantastic book. Kai says, I meant more. Do you use a special razor? Do you soak them in steam first? All that stuff. No, I just use a trimmer, and that's all I do. Because I found that if I shave with like what's it called, like a wet, what's the all the lint from my sweater. This is like, I bought the sweater in the States, and it's just the only thing that it's done for me is that there's lint on my forehead whenever I like pull it over my head. It's horrible, but it's getting less and less now. That's good. But in the beginning, it was like big piece of lint. Yeah, I don't do like the wet shaving, because I find like the hair gets really what's it called? Like my girlfriend complains because it stings her. You know what I mean? That's, yeah. And anyway, English. You should try a mohawk. Yeah, that'd be awesome though. Yeah, I could see myself doing a mohawk, I think. Like, I tried having like the sides shaved off, like what's it called, a side cut, I think. But man, it was so much work, and just shaving everything off is just the easiest way to do things. And I had dreadlocks for such a long time. In case you haven't seen that, like before I had before I went bald, I had dreadlocks for like 10 years. You can still see that in the very first videos on the Holistic Songwriting channel. And it was just so much work to maintain. And they didn't look so nice in the end anymore, so I just shaved them off. And this is heaven. It's so much easier and way breezier in summer. Guys, was good talking to you. Had a blast talking to you folks, and I didn't want to bring it up. All right, I'll see you guys next week, probably, maybe on Patreon. We'll see. Otherwise, you get to shame me publicly. I'll agree to it. Take care, guys.